morning, Bridge family and friends. How y'all doing today? Y'all doing good? Okay. Why don't you stand for about 30 seconds and just give God some praise. He's carried us through a long year last year, and here we are on the first Sunday of the year in the house of prayer. Awesome. Thank y'all. Yeah. All right, y'all can be seated because y'all didn't give me no energy with that anyway. Like I wasn't going to notice, right? You've probably seen this sign before. I'm sure you've seen this sign before. A sign that says, under new management. Yeah, y'all seen it, right? Tip is normally taped on the door of maybe a restaurant or posted outside of an apartment complex. Sometimes it's even hanging in a window of a place that's been around for a long time, at least long enough for the people of said community to have some really strong opinions about the place. And when we see this, we don't need an explanation. We already know what this means. It means that someone finally listened. It means someone admitted things weren't working. And it means that what they were doing before wasn't sustainable and change is coming. Not just cosmetic change, like a fresh coat of paint, a few flowers planted out in front, but it typically means that there's going to be a directional change, a change in leadership. So when we see that sign and when I see that sign, sometimes I think, you know what? Maybe just this time it'll be a little different. Maybe this time it's going to be a little bit better. And so that's kind of the idea behind this new series that we're going to be in for the entire month of January. And the series is called, you guessed it, yeah. Because if we're honest, if I'm honest, we really don't need just another tip, just to create another habit or another New Year's resolution. As a matter of fact, I'm about 7 years behind on New Year's resolutions, just to be honest with y'all. Anybody ever make it through their New Year's resolutions in the room? Besides Tehran? Because honestly, we need leadership. We need leadership in places where we've been trying to manage on our own for far too long. So welcome to the Bridge, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy birthday to the January babies. We're so glad that you're with us. We're so glad that you're watching with us online. And every week we say this. Every week I say this. And it's because every week somebody needs to hear it. Every week someone needs to be reminded that this is a safe space. It's a safe space for you to struggle and a safe space to be skeptical. We say all the time, you don't have to have it all together. You don't have to hide your questions. You don't have to pretend that you are okay even when you are not. And especially today. And so for the next 4 weeks, we're going to be hanging out with one of Jesus' friends. His name is Mark. And we're going to be watching what happens when Jesus steps into the areas of our lives that we usually try to manage ourselves. We'll be talking about our health, how we manage that, our time, even how we manage our story, the stories that's been told to us, about us, and the stories we tell others about ourselves. And then finally, we're going to close that out, and we're going to be talking about, anybody can guess it? Yeah, look at Nina. You said that's so dry. Come on, give me some energy. Give me some of that. Shut your mouth and keep on talking. When we talk about money, don't go all dry. Money. Yeah. You're right. We're going to be talking about money. And here's the thing. What's underneath it all is just this simple reality. And we all know it's true that, and this is the thing that we're come back to over and over again, is when we try to manage life on our own, we eventually break down. And when that happens, it costs. It costs us and it costs the people that we love. And today we're going to begin this series. We're going to kick this off with health, because when our bodies and or our minds are worn down, everything else suffers. And so here's the question, the big question that's driving today. I may come back to this later in the series, but for today, for sure, we're asking the question, what happens when Jesus brings the part of our lives that feel out of control under new management? And we're going to be looking again at this story recorded in the book of Mark. And here's what I believe it's clear in these few verses that we're going to be looking at, 8 to 10 verses we're going to be looking at. It is when Jesus takes over. When Jesus is the one who we submit, who we surrender to, who we say is Lord, is King, who we say has the final say, when we say is the clearest voice at our tables, he brings things with him. When he is in control, he brings with him healing, he brings restoration, and he brings peace. So in Mark 5, there's the story of this woman, and this woman had suffered. According to the scripture, she had suffered for years. And Mark slows down for us just so we can watch what happens when someone who's tried everything else finally places their life under new management. And our first observation, the first thing I want to say is that we'll see in this story is that Jesus, he meets us where our bodies break down. Because Jesus, he's a healer. He is the master physician, and he meets us where our bodies break down. Look with me really quickly at Mark chapter 5. First, we're going to look at just a few verses, then we'll keep going. In the first two verses, he says, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years and who had suffered much under many physicians and had spent all, what's left out of all, y'all? Spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather she grew worse. And the first thing I want to highlight here is this isn't just a bad season. This isn't just a rough patch. She just isn't strong. This was a long-term thing. It says she had this discharge of blood. Some translations, some older translations would say she had this issue of blood. She had this medical condition, this discharge of blood, and it says for 12 years. I don't know about you all, but man, 12 hours is too long for me to be feeling bad. 12 days? Oh man, I'm going to be trying everything. 12 weeks? Can you imagine? 12 months? But no, he says 12 years. And so this is not just a short period of time. And so this is how this would have affected her and impacted her. This discharge she had, it would have deemed her to be unclean. And she would have had to self-quarantine from the rest of society for fear of her being contagious. This would have separated her from her friends. This would have separated from her of even her family. And then to make it all worse, we see here also that she had spent all that she had. So not only is she still sick, not only is she still in isolation, but now, to make matters worse, she broke too. Somebody said that sister is having a hard time. Her hope is thin. Can you imagine? And Mark wants us to notice something here as we're looking at these texts. Before we rush by it, before we get so spiritual, we get spooky, Mark wants us to see something very important here. The first thing I notice is that one thing we see about this lady is not only that she's consistent, but she's proactive. She is pursuing help at all costs. She has done what she was supposed to do. So it's not that she is denying her physical condition. It is not that she is not in cooperation with her own healing. It says that she had suffered much under many physicians. And so she didn't just take the first doctor. She didn't just take the second doctor. She would have been searching out and seeking out and hunting out and looking for a resolution. And she suffered. The word says suffer. That means that every time she was going and meeting with these doctors and these physicians, there was probably not a lot of hope. And everyone told her the same thing. You're incurable. You need to quarantine. You're not safe for others to be around. And so she's consistent. She's being proactive. She's pursuing her own health. She's talking to the doctors. She even spent all that she had. Now, I just don't know if I could pull that trigger. I think I'm gonna die with at least $20. At least $20, but she spent all that she had. And then it tells us, like, she didn't get better. She got worse. Can you imagine? You're pursuing your health. You're doing the right things. You're spending your money in the right places, and you are getting worse by the day. And here's another thing we need to really be clear about is that this matters, that her pursuit of her health and spending all of her money, that wasn't her being irresponsible. It was her using some wisdom. It was her being human, saying, I don't care what it takes. I need to get better. But also what it shows us, even though she was proactive, even though she was participating in her own health, even though she did everything that she could do, she was also limited, just like you and just like me. And that's what happens when we try to manage our bodies all on our own. We find out that we have limits. And at some point, our body starts telling the truth. You know, y'all gonna judge me, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I love y'all. Yeah. So me and my wife, well, really me, I was looking on social media and I was scrolling and I was noticing something that on everybody's picture, boy, they looked angelic. Right? I mean, they had this glow on them, and y'all know what that is. That's called it's called a filter, right? And in my judgmental, self-righteous self, I asked my wife, I said, babe, why are they putting these filters on? We know what they look like in real life. So I know I'm the only person that's ever thought that, right? Yeah. And so, because, hey, but no matter what we do, the filters we put on, rather on social media or in real life, eventually our body starts to tell the truth, even when every other area of our life looks successful. The promotion, the car, the vacation, the house, and all of the things that we've been believing God for. We look like we're disciplined. We look like we're put together. But if we're honest, we all have limits. And that's why a story like Deion Sanders, it kind of, this one rocks me. I'm just going to be honest. He's one of the greatest football players of all time. As a matter of fact, I think he is the best football player of all time. He is my favorite. Y'all see him rocking that jersey? Y'all know what that means, right? Yeah. Elite genetics, discipline, a drug-free lifestyle, relentless commitment to taking care of his body, outspoken in public about his faith and his pursuit of Jesus, imperfectly but faithfully and publicly. And yet years after a Hall of Fame career, by the way, if y'all didn't know, he played 2 sports. He also played Major League Baseball. And after years of this Hall of Fame career, this man that dazzled crowds, this man that we call prime time, neon, Deion, this man, his body began to fail him. Surgeries and circulation issues and blood clots. And one day I was watching him as he was approaching the stand to do a press conference after a game, and he was laboring and it was physical, and I'm such a fan, and so it was painful for me to watch, and it was clear people wanted to know, how are you doing? You're looking bad. They didn't want to say that, but that was the reality. And he said something, and he was honest and he was vulnerable, and he said it into a microphone, and millions of people were watching. And here this leader, this head coach, this multi-millionaire, this elite athlete, he says, I'm hurting like crazy. And he said, I'm not getting any blood to my leg. Because he had these circulation issues, already had some toes amputated. He's fighting to keep his leg. His hope is one day to run again. And he said, man, I'm hurting like crazy. And here's why that hurts me, because if someone like him who did everything right with their body, ate right, worked out, took the right vitamins, did all of the stuff, then maybe health isn't just about our effort. Maybe we also need to be concerned about our limits. And this is where this question, this is where this pushback, this is where this surfaces in my heart, and maybe even in yours. We ask the question, even about this lady who was struggling for 12 years. If Jesus is a healer, if he meets us where our bodies break down, why does suffering last so long? And if our bodies are going to break down, even when we're faithful, even when we're drinking water and we're exercising and we're resting and we're taking fiber and protein and we're doing all of the stuff, our body's still going to break down? What's the point? Right? But the good news is Mark, he doesn't rush past this tension. He acknowledges, and this is where he kind of lands in this story, because what he's going to show us is, as we continue to read these verses, under new management, Jesus doesn't ask us to neglect our bodies, but he does invite us to stop acting like they are self-sustaining. Because good management, it means paying attention to our limits, not denying them. And some of us really need to hear this. Taking care of your body is not unspiritual. Believing God for a miracle is okay, but we still cannot ignore our health issues, and we too need to be like this woman and participate and pursue our own health goals. And here's another thing that's so true, is that Jesus, he heals, and that frees us. His healing, it frees us to manage our bodies, acknowledging our limits, and to manage our bodies honestly, instead of driving them into the ground. And for most of us, this is going to happen either one way. You may be driving your body in the ground via neglect. You are not eating the right things. You are not getting proper rest. You are not drinking water. You are not exercising. And then for others, you just will work yourself into the ground. So it's either neglect or it's overwork. And both of them, we end up in the same place. But Jesus just doesn't meet us where our bodies break down, like in the story with this woman. He restores our dignity. At verse number 27, it goes on and it says, she had heard the reports about Jesus. And she came up behind him in the crowd, and she touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And then in verse 29, it says something. It says, and immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed from her disease. And so here's what we see, is that Jesus, he restores our dignity. And it's not by shaming us, but it's by meeting us in our vulnerability, meeting us in our honesty. If you go back to the verse real quick, go back to the verse right there. It says right here, it says first we see that she came up from behind. She came up from behind in shame and guilt. She knew she wasn't supposed to be in public. She didn't even need to make eye contact with this man. She didn't need to acknowledge him, and she didn't need him to acknowledge her. She came up from behind because she knew she was incurable. She knew she was considered unclean, and she knew that everybody around her thought that she was contagious. She knew her limits. She was already broke. She already had been carrying years of trauma and shame. But she heard about Jesus. The shame, the trauma, the disease, the isolation, all of those things. She heard about Jesus. And family, here's the thing. We can learn a lot from her story, because sometimes we need to be reminded of what we too have heard about Jesus. And sometimes, if we're honest, we need to be brave enough to go and tell someone else about Jesus. Because what we see here is she reaches anyway, the shame, the trauma, no money. She's not supposed to be there. But she says that she came up behind him and she touched his garment. And this is what she was saying in her mind. If I can just touch, I will be made well. If this Jesus that she had heard about, even though she had shame, even though she had trauma, even though she had an incurable disease, she said that if I can, I will be made well. And so for some of us, that's all we have to do. We don't have to pretend that we're okay. We just have to take a step toward help. We just have to be willing to stretch and reach out anyway, hoping to make contact with the Savior of the world, with the one who died for us, with the one who rose again, with all power, with all authority. And we know that when he rose, he defeated both sickness, disease. He defeated death and the grave. He defeated all sin. And so some days I pull up at home into my driveway, and I can't get out the car right away. Sometimes I'm just sitting in silence. No radio. I'm just sitting. Most of the time what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to leave the stress of the day there in that car. So when I walk inside of my house, I can not just be present with my family, but also I can be pleasant. Anybody ever came home, right, and you had so much stuff going on in your day that everybody in the house, they just was on the receiving end of the hell that you were raising? Oh, that's just me. Anybody else in here guilty? Like, you come in and you're just so angry, you're so tired. The text you got, the phone call you got, what you saw on social media, the latest news article, and you've been at work all day or you've been in public all day, so you've had to be polite and pretend. But when you get home, your people get the real you. Yeah. That's what I'm doing. Some days that works for me. That's exactly what I need. I can go in there and I can have my quiet minute. I can have a meditative moment. I can refocus. I can recenter. I can reorder myself, and I go in the house and I'm good. But I'm being honest, some days I have to fake it. I wish I didn't have to. I wish I didn't have to say that out loud. But truthfully, sometimes I fake it. I go in the house. I put on a smile. I try to engage, but my body and my mind really hasn't caught up yet. My wife notices it quick because she's talking to me and I'm not really responsive. My kids notices it quick because of my posture and my demeanor. I'm making everybody in the house uncomfortable. Right? See, I know ain't nobody else in here and did that but me. I walk in, the preacher, the man of God, the Holy One from Israel. No, I'm just kidding. I walk in, and when I come in, the temperature of the room changes, not in a positive direction. Sometimes I fake it. But that's not what this lady does. She doesn't pretend that she's okay. She doesn't put on a fake smile. She doesn't fake. She just reaches for Jesus' garment. Have you ever been into any of your capacity? Out of money, out of options. Things are going from bad to worse. Yeah, me too. And some of us, many of us, we can get hesitant when it's come time to seeking help. It doesn't matter whether you believe in Jesus like I do or not. This is something that's universal for all people. The fear of being perceived as weak, incompetent, fraudulent. Sometimes that hinders our ability to simply reach out and ask for the help we know we desperately need. Have you ever had to question your own parenting? The contribution you're making? Your belonging? If I'm honest, I do too. If I'm honest, I sometimes doubt myself. But see, when we're under new management, part of managing our health well is learning to tell the truth about what's actually going on, not just in your body, but also in your mind. We cannot manage what we refuse to name. Because Jesus, again, he not only meets us in where our bodies break down, but he restores our dignity, not by shaming us, by meeting us in our vulnerability and in our honesty. My last observation. And Jesus also, he does something else, and I really like this part. He also gives peace. And it's just not an ordinary, generic, chucking up the deuces kind of peace. It's the kind of peace that restores identity. It's the kind of peace that secures our future. And we're going to read through these next 4 or 5 verses really quickly. And it says, starting at verse 30, and Jesus perceived in himself, after all this had happened, this woman with this issue, who had all these issues, spent all these money, all these doctors, she got worse, she was still sick, all of these things. She came, she heard about Jesus, she reached out and she touched his garment, she found herself being healed. The scripture says this took place immediately, and Jesus perceived in himself that the power had gone out of him. Mark uses the same word for Jesus, and it says he immediately turned around about in the crowd and he said, "Who touched my garments?" He then began to look for a person, a face, a name, a story. He looked, he said, "Who?" And the disciples said to him, "Man, Jesus, what you talking about, dude? You tripping. The crowd is pressing around you. All these people, and you going to ask, who touched me?" Verse 32, and he looked around to see who had done it. And then this is where it gets really interesting. Right here in verse 33, it says, but the woman, we don't have her name. We have her story, though. The woman, knowing what had happened to her. She knew immediately that she was made well. She knew it immediately. She came in fear and trembling. So here she comes. She knew what happened. She was whole. She was healed. But she knew she had broken the rules. She knew she had broken the laws. She knew she had potentially put Jesus and everybody else at risk of being contaminated. And she came down. She knelt down before him and she told him a lie. She made up a story. She made up an excuse. She blamed it on her mama, her daddy, her brother, her sister, the dog, the roaches, everybody else. It was everybody else's fault except her. That ain't what it say, right? No, she said she told him the whole truth. And this is what he said to her in response to that. He said, "You harlot, get out of here." He said, "You disrespectful little wench." He said, "You disobedient, trifling." No, he didn't. He could have. If he would have said, "You're disobedient," that would have been true. She was breaking the law. If he'd have said, "You disrespectful person, how dare you contaminate me," that would have been within his right because what she did was technically against the law. But he says something completely different. He says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." The bleeding had already stopped. Jesus didn't rush. He stops, he turns, he draws this woman out of hiding. And he calls her daughter. That's just not a sentimental word. Like, "What's up, bro? What's up, cuz?" I got a question, though, real quick. Y'all, somebody can answer me later. Why do no, I better not ask. Let me keep going. Let me go. Never mind. I'm going to get myself in some trouble. Never mind. That's not a sentimental word. This is a restorative word. This is a word where he is re-anchoring her identity as an image bearer of God. This is where he is reminding her, he is reclaiming her, he is letting her know that you are more than your story. You are more than your trauma. You are more than your shame. You are more than your disease. You are a daughter of the Most High, made in his image with dignity and beautifully and wonderfully made for purpose. For 12 years, isolated, out of society, spiritually, relationally. She had lived as a perpetual outsider. And with one word, and this is after she was already healed. Because we all know that we can be physically well and still be in isolation. We can be physically whole and still be alone. We can be physically well, we can have money in the bank, and we can still cry ourselves to sleep every night. But what he does, he reminds her, and now she belongs. She is no longer an outsider. She is now under his care and under his protection, because that's what a good God does, and that's what Jesus does. He meets her in her broken body. He restores her dignity. And then also he says this, he says, go to the next, right here. He says, go in peace. That word peace just doesn't describe how she's feeling in that moment, but this is a word that secures her entire future. Peace means she no longer have to live looking over her shoulder. Peace means her life is no longer defined by fear or instability. Peace is where hope has room to grow again. Jesus just doesn't heal her body. He restores her place in the word. He renews her life holistically, and he gives her dignity. There's a psychologist, his name is Dr. Bessel, and he worked with people for many years who had survived trauma, combat veterans, abuse survivors, a lot of children who have been through very traumatic experiences. And one of the things he noticed when he was doing this work over the many years was that not that people would remember what happened to them, because that was kind of expected for them to be able to tell what happened. But really, what blew his mind is that not that they remembered it, but that their bodies did. He said people could be sitting safely in a room, years removed from the event, but then when they start talking about it, suddenly their hearts would start to beat faster. Suddenly, their muscles would tense up. Suddenly, their breathing pattern would change. They would get anxious. They would get afraid. It could be years removed from the traumatic incident. Nothing dangerous was happening. They were in a safe room, in a safe environment. But their bodies were reacting to the experience that happened just as if it happened in that moment. And over time, this is what the doctor came to realize, is that trauma, it doesn't just live in our memories. It also lives in the body. And he eventually wrote these words. He said that the body keeps the score. That's why managing our health in a way that honors God is important. That's why we take care of ourselves, because I don't care who you are, where you're from, none of that matters. Your body will eventually tell the truth. In other words, even when our life moves on, our bodies don't. They carry the stress, they carry the feel, and they carry the grief. And there's some research says that we can even pass this on to our children. And some of us know what this feels like firsthand. Some of us don't sleep well. Not because we're lazy, but because our bodies have never learned to rest again. Some of us feel tension the moment we walk into certain rooms or conversations. Some of us feel exhausted, even when nothing's really happening. Because here's the truth, our bodies have been on high alert for so long. We see a threat in the clouds when the sun is shining. You know, when you was a kid, you look in the clouds and you say, that's Santa Claus. And then your boy said, that ain't Santa Claus, that's Tupac. Right? But sometimes we've been on high alert for so long. We've lived so long under pressure, so long under trauma. We've only seen it. We've only witnessed it, the fighting, the arguing, the violence, all of the stuff. We've been around it so long that we perceive a threat even when there is not one present, because our bodies are keeping the score. And that's what was happening with this woman when she came up in fear and trembling. She was already healed. Why is she trembling? Why is she fearful? Because her body still keeps the score. She's still connected to her trauma, even though she had been physically healed. And that's why when he says, go in peace, you're healed. That's why it is so important. When he says, go in peace, it means a lot. It means now you're able to go and be all that God has created you to be. Now you're able to go and be a blessing to those you love. Now you're able to go and be your best self. Now you're able to go and be legendary. Only 2 people got it. They said amen too in their head. Because peace is when the future no longer feels dangerous, but it feels bright and inviting. And so Jesus gives her peace because peace is what allows life to begin again. Because under new management, peace doesn't mean everything is fixed. It just means that you're no longer visible and you're no longer unprotected. It means your future is no longer defined by what you've been through or what you're carrying, but by who God, the good God, says that you are. And this is why this matters, because it's just not about you feeling a little bit better. I want to feel better, and I know you want to do, but imagine how your life may change if you were living under new management. Imagine how your health, not perfect, but cared for. Imagine your mind not constantly racing and you were more settled. Imagine your relationships not shaped by exhaustion, more shaped by you being able to be present. Because when we try to manage our life on our own, we eventually break down. It costs us and the people we love. But when Jesus steps in, he heals, he restores, he brings dignity. And here's one of the things we're going to be doing for the course of this series. We're going to be inviting you all to participate in a challenge. We're calling it our 2026 Health Challenge. And there's a place right there in the app where you're going to be able to log into, and we're inviting you to sign up with this challenge for us. Sister Michelle Williams has been so kind. She's offering us some coaching and some support free from one of her online courses, and we're going to be able over the next 28 days, we are going to be pursuing this health challenge together. Guess what, y'all? It don't start till when it start? Tomorrow. That means we can eat that cake and eat those cupcakes. I'm getting 2 pieces of fried chicken. You know what I mean? Hey. And then I'm gonna have my wife bake some cookies tonight. And then, no, I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Maybe. Who knows? Pray for me. But we're all going to be invited to participate in this challenge together. And what we're saying is we want to be a healthier church family. So I'm inviting you to participate in this challenge. All right, church, I'm out of time.